The frame for the servo clock started off as a piece of rough sawn lumber this size. I bought this about 10 years ago. It's been sitting in my shop on sticks. It gets about 115 to 120 degrees out there in the summertime. I ran this across the joiner on this side and on one edge, planed the other side parallel, and cut strips from it that were this wide. And even though this has been sitting out in that shop for 10 years and has acclimated, you cut a piece of wood like this, it can bend or twist because you have relieved stresses in that wood. So after those strips were cut and I ran it through the planer again to true this up, then proceeded to machine the profiles for this frame. So you can see a piece of rough sawn lumber can be pretty rough, and some of this was the same way on the faces as well. Then I took these sticks and ran them across the table saw again. I made this cut and this cut, which removed about 1/3 of the weight of this stick. And this was machined on the router table. And then all the edges I could get to were rounded over with a small roundover bit just to break that edge. When you cut into a piece of wood like this, you're not sure what you're going to find. I knew I had a wormhole. I didn't know how deep it went. And it came back about this far on that piece of wood. And sometimes you'll find a knot, or the tree may have been through a tornado and it's been twisted and then healed. When you rip that on the table saw, then those stresses start bending that piece of wood. Even though you start off with a large piece of timber, you may be lucky to get a frame out of it. After you put your frame together, sometimes this wood will continue to change and these joints can open up on you. So I like to cut a slot across here and put a spline in there. So once you've cut the slot, and I have a video on a thin stock adapter for a small shop plane, you can just very slowly sneak up on the right thickness to just go in that slot. You want it to be just loose enough to allow some glue to get in there. You'll glue that in there, and when it dries, cut it off and sand it smooth. I like to do this as soon as possible after the frame has been assembled. You just need to make a simple adapter. This is 90 degrees and holds your frame at 45 to the table. Then your saw blade height is adjusted to get whatever depth cut you want. Put a clamp down here, keep this from falling over. And I have marked these ahead of time, rough cut them on the bandsaw. When you put the glue in here, it will make the wood swell up, so you need to work fairly fast. If you don't know what these are acid or glue brushes. Better to have too much glue than not enough. Some people will complain about this because they say the glue is going to get into the wood and it'll affect your stain. I don't intend to use any stain on this frame. It's not a bad idea to set this to one side for an hour or so anyway. let that glue set up before you turn it over and start to do the other side. You do want to make sure that these splines have gone all the way down in those slots. Get a pocket of glue in there and it can hydraulic that spline and keep it up off the bottom. So that's one reason why I tap it a little bit with a rubber hammer. I had these pieces of wood all cut out, and I went ahead and I mitered the ends. It was a couple hours before I got around to actually gluing it together, and in that short period of time, some of these pieces had slightly twisted or bowed, and these didn't go together as precisely as I would have liked. My joinery is not necessarily that good anyway, so there were some areas that I used a little bit of filler, and that stood out white. So where it was white, I just took a lead pencil, just rubbed it on some of that, and just take a wet paper towel and just wipe that. And all you're doing is dirtying up that wood filler. You've got some dark flecks that run through this wood anyway. And when that dries, you can't even see it anymore. So I had a choice. I could either try to save it or throw it away and start over. Excellent chance the next piece of wood would do the same thing or worse. So I decided to try and save it. The servo mechanism goes into the frame, and I have these pieces that hold that in place. And some of the electronics nets stick out quite a ways. So these are standoffs to hold the frame a little bit away from the wall. Most picture frames aren't flush against the wall anyway. That's what gives your spiders and geckos a place to hide. I had originally planned to box this in and have a piece of plexiglass across the front, but that frame was going to end up being about 35, 40 pounds. So I changed my mind and did it this way. I'm actually making two of these clocks. This is the second frame. These were made a little bit different. This piece is a little bit higher than the other one. And I changed the dimensions of the cutout here to go around the clock mechanism itself. And we got a couple pieces of wood, got some leather on it. That will go there and there, and with a screw in it, and that will hold that in place. I did end up staining this. I used golden oak, and then there's several coats of lacquer sprayed onto this, Deft lacquer. And as you can see, I changed the color combinations for both clocks. That is an advantage if you have a 3D printer. If you make something, you don't like it, you can change it, just print it again. When I built both of these, I used these real-time clock modules, and in my opinion, these are not worth the powder to blow them up. These are junk. Both of these clocks gained 3 minutes in 2 weeks, and I have Woodgear clocks that are way more accurate than that. So that had to change. With the help of a friend of mine in Germany, gone in and changed the electronics and the programming on these clocks in a couple of ways. I used a different real-time clock module, and I've put some of these infrared sensing devices in both clocks. They're referred to as PIRs, and they will detect a warm body when it enters the room. If nobody's in the room, that allows the clock to go to sleep, and there's no reason to be wearing these servos out if nobody's there to see what time it is. So extensive changes made to the wiring and to the sketch for these clocks, and I'll go into that in the next video.